Today I'm speaking with the Venerable Kirti Tsenshab Rinpoche about death and dying in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Rinpoche is a highly respected Lama in the Gelugpa branch of Tibetan Buddhism. He was recognized as the incarnation of the abbot of Taksang Lama Monastery in Tibet. He became a monk at the age of 9, studied at Drepung Losaling Monastery in Tibet, and furthered his studies at Buxa in India. Rinpoche is known as one of the main lineage holders of the Kalachakra Tantra. For the last 18 years, he has been living as a renounced meditator in Dharamsala, India. Canadian monk Gareth Sparham is doing the translation. In the West, in recent years, there has been a rapid development of the hospice movement for the care of the dying. Does Rinpoche think that one can be of benefit to those who are dying?
message de Maran Tabadi, never said the English. Tin only Robert never touching what they like you. That Maran Chua touching you, then never the other man come surgeon Zigayana, the ending of Maran. Got to go, Patajachi with the younger.
First thing is it's certain these new sorts of hospitals, hospices, which are made specifically for those people who are facing the end of their lives, that besides the general great benefit of hospitals, these have an additional benefit indeed at this present time.
What is the best way that we can help those who are dying or have just died?
Like a chendo yuna, pento chembo lagade, carres, not so chome.
That means Shikala Casavara.
That is Shikalamota, that is Shitsawa.
Shitsawa,
Dini Shikalamota, Shimatape.
Already Dikada.
Nika Masu, pento chendo yuna, Masu, so did Karichabre.
Yeah. Or that day when he Pentachimu younger, they carried his cena. Or the message de Maricana Gadilla, Yan Tabani, Din on it, Hubbard the Mar, Yan Taban on the Marichan, Yan Tabani Kavimbach. Or that dinner and take Kavla, or that you killing Idiana, Marapozang Chu, Ratunda or Doris, Sandicia. Or that you are Tono Ming Diana, Samsung Buchiana. Or that you. Some Gatu monument, some Trubuji money, Shayana, Petachibuji, pero the and do take of that, have said Jaradima, Kirtibu young.
I think there's two things we should keep in consideration. The person who for some time has had a religious faith, and the person who doesn't have a specific religious faith. If a person, for example, has faith in Buddhism, then one can enunciate to them at the time of their dying those things which they've learned to trust and have refuge in. For those who haven't a specific religious faith, the best thing I think to tell them is that they should try to have a good thoughts, try to think good thoughts, not bad ones. At the time when the person is dying and in great trouble, if somehow they can cause themselves to somehow get a little bit happy, feel a little bit better, turn their mind to good thoughts, then there's great benefit indeed in that.
When that you do that you are not, when that you might choose Hosan Yomi in that, you sound to some siege, some Sambuchia, Tonio Goya, Jambu Goya, this and the Jigua. When that you choose Tono Mingi in a young. Whether you Kuso noise and Kangardi, something Kongana, Tindagamara, Kangarju Mayama, something Damimara, Chibuya, Dibuya, Monamia Fuji, Damna, Chudonomina, Tim Hengri, whether Tindaga, also Tinaya Fuji.
If I continue talking relative to the two sorts of person. The person who's got a faith in Buddhism already, to that sort of person, one can bring to the mind of that person the remembrance that they have about what they rely on, their refuge, about generating bodhicitta, about tangyong, about stabilizing the mind in meditative stabilization. These sort of things are very beneficial for that person, for the Buddhist person. For the person who doesn't have a specific religion like Buddhism, then what one can say is, think, may everybody be happy, may all living beings be happy, may every living being please somehow be freed of their misery. Those sorts of ideas, general ideas of wishing well to others, these are very, very helpful indeed.
Oda tinda chigdong, da tini nangsi shirakan chigi tamandra kari yuwari sena, oda chigi chugul hojang jingi, chula tonang yungi tinda yenna, shikala ka chigi 상지가 그 뭐그 통산이 말이잖아. 어다 상지가 그라 말. 뭐그 딱엔지 되라 말 짬루지. 어다 되니지 상지가 센다다. 정어 사무된다. 암자가 나나 말. 어다 고겐지 되라 지와야나요. 지와시마데 야홀냐야란 패다 치버되는 거죠. 어다 되는지.
시차.
시차라니. 시카라 카데라. 시카라 카데.
Just as the person is about to pass away, given that the person is a Buddhist and has sort of a Buddhist faith, then it can be beneficial indeed to gently say in their presence the qualities that the Buddha has, bring to mind the form of the Buddha. These sorts of things can have a great benefit and cause the person to, in a future lifetime, find a rebirth in a fine place.
오다 되라 지지 다더니 단시 살비지 되라지 어디 다 도와주마가 나는 욕이죠. 다 같이 되는 이거면.
So
어디다 단단한 맛이가 나오진 지 무신이디 말아 넘버추 도장 용이 어다지 된다고 공룡 용이 지였나 어다 되라지 뭐그 색깔가 되라 뭐그 통산이 선지지 끝다 통칸다 선지지 끝되니 시험니 말아 되라 잠르지야가 말아 산들지야 어다지 냐네 지야가 측사모 정어사모다 말 암정노 두겐지 어다 되니 선들지야도 말아 색깔가 탑시다 어다 셋사비지서 지금 본부대라 공장모장지 말 저는 글적 맞잖아요. 상로 땅 탕이도 냐네 용이지나 대원 팽이 와요. 냐네 명이나요. 수부대라 말 글적 제가 옛날 심 참무디 말 셔츠 으르바디 치디 와르데 농거 심 참무디 니디 와yen데 되라요. 너준지가 와yen데 다디 가니비 자잖아요. 팽분하지 용.
So as I was saying then, the person who has thought about Buddhism before, for that sort of person, as they're about to die, if there's a
breath and heart have stopped, which are the usual signs of death in the West, how long is it before the consciousness leaves the body?
미치 대신에 안에 우중대 가
우리
우중대 가가도와
우리
안에 이니어 다선 처모데 누군데 요르와
우리
다 신내
우리
선 처모데 파조나 징라 두처징라
우리
같이 요리
우리 도와디 오다 된다 시와인도 다저당 된다 성요하러 가지 로디상 말 제рем본 나딩이 오다지 말 즈부디 말 세딩이 또시 메딩이 마된다다 오다 되니지 양 가시 말 lu terma lu chang chang yin na yang lu ma bo la ma na ne song se ding tin da ge ri ti la shini xue ji se ji ben na che zu ka xin da dang xiao bo jing me ding yi tin da yang yong se ge wa wo da ji ma terma zubu to xi yong ni lam sang na ding ni zubu se mi ni to xi yong ni da dang wo da tin da ge ri ge me da su xue ce la我在上面几上面你上面什么人嘛？点这个人了嘛？写作个的嘛，古讲讲的名义的，求的钱呢，那个什么长么的，在等的如果那么的定的，我就点这样个有什么有人的点这个什么这个你样。
I think there's probably two sorts of person one can identify here, probably. For example, if you have a young child, or if you have somebody who's been wasting away for a long period of time, and who's been undergoing, you might say, a long gradual process into death, then probably the mind, the subtle mind, whatever, won't stay there for a long time. It might only remain perhaps for a day or something, not very long anyway. If a person, however, has quite a strong physique, in other words, that they're in really quite good sort of health, then they die rather more suddenly. For that person, the subtle wind, this mind, spirit, can stay for a longer time, up to for as long as 3 days.
我到底了知道，但是呢，用但那个这个你有啊，你个哪呢？但那个是过去上世定路地上来的，就台湾毛不当，路毛不啦，那定一个每日定的，然后现在全部忙过了，同一这样给我了，第空第的，就然后没就传当地嘛，然后家面嘛，地嘛他们谁这个没这样。 全部得个没心的，我在南山南西的通州有时印度，定一个这个看呢，这样的看着个的吧，我在定的。本来就没你讲的说的，真这个嘛，南山后的个谁这个，我在定的人呢，定这个这个南西的。 也人不没得吧，但他员工当罗马不那定的，下上呢，家不没得，也人不没得吧，很容易电脑人个，那些的家不同一个这个地方都有。
Now then, there's another sort of death too, of course. That's the violent death, for want of a better way to call it. The death, for example, when two people are fighting and a person is suddenly murdered, suddenly killed. That sort of person, that sort of very sudden, violent death. The person who dies that sort of death is probably of the same sort as the person who's undergone a long slide into death. The spirit, the mind doesn't remain there long, it goes out very quickly. So we can put that sort of person in the category of the person whose spirit remains only a small time.
I think
one or the other, you're going to find people in one of these two categories, those who remain for a shorter time and which stay for a bit of a longer time.
So just to reiterate, Rinpoche is saying that the consciousness
if you think, it goes without saying, if you had a yogi on your hands, you'd obviously not sort of go up and immediately start disturbing the person. Since even an ordinary person, spirit or sem, their mind, doesn't leave, it's possible at least that it doesn't leave for a period of as long as 3 days, then it's sort of like if you have somebody asleep, you go up and give them a good shake, they'll immediately wake up. It's sort of like that. If you can, if the conditions are such that one can possibly not disturb them for a while, then it's obviously a good thing to do.
탐 기보지 자가마다 셔찬이 돈이 자니 라바 만청하지 니마 섬그래라 미야고이나 냠네 용이나 명이나 자니 구정마지가 지자야디 룩소네 착기요.
So that's why there's a tradition in Tibet for the helpers of a dying person. Never mind whether they're a great yogi or yogini or not. That's not the point. There's the tradition that if it's possible to not disturb the person even for as long as 3 days, and if one has to move the body, to move very gently, to be sort of careful with it, not to do things violently and suddenly. This tradition has come about in Tibet on account of this idea.
Wadape tirati nojen shikala katiraji thola kabya tulu kunda tindayo chaba chisayana tumbunda yuayana shapo khasiya jagana ko ru tomato no rundu yuwa te yendu taso mashi kone kali ge marthe yakthandi yakpoji tham khiboji mashi kona di den taso tumbu yuna so te kali ge tile jigosi te tashi mon chawi ge.
It's as one, for example, takes away the say the person dies on a bed and so forth, then one's going to take away the sheets and things like this. One's going to take away the mattress and so forth. But one does that as gently as one can too. One doesn't just quickly take them away, but one tries to do this slowly and gently and without upsetting the person who's just died.
Benaji da poniya tinda ga luksuri warwa makasigan phambodi shikala ka mara ji zubud zo yabo mara detang yabo jiga benaji domba zo mara dadaji da mara shisiji na dena jiwa yana shatsawa kabs mugit zo mara domya mugsam dewa tinda yonsa karwa makasi yang mugdang dena sinan jiga tinda yonga yendu jagduna the Zubundani Marti, the Sony Martin, Kali, Dagda, Tinajino, Tashi Hoyambi, or you do Tinaji quite.
Similarly, when people die, some people die with their eyes wide open, some might die with their eyes closed and so on, and there's a tradition to close the eyes to smooth the skin, perhaps if there's a certain sort of expression on the face to smooth it out and to make it look better, or to at least smooth it out and close the eyes. If one's doing that, do it with a sort of gentleness, slow movements, not again to disturb the person who's just died, to disturb the spirit of the person who's just died.
Well, that did not be noise, and I moved to take a mar yapoji mar Traducigo at the noise, Katos Valayon, the Dada Chitila Magina, Makasi Cardone, Martina Gidivayana, Makasi Shinongia in Kayuara, so Congregaton, Tamkiwojigo.
Similarly, for example, say the person died with their mouth wide open and their eyes wide open, and then somebody comes into the room to sort of pay their last respects to that person. They're going to sort of be taken aback and perhaps frightened. So a good method to stop that sort of thing is indeed then to close the person's mouth, to sort of make them look a bit better, so that when a person comes into the room to look at them, they don't look so bad. Then it doesn't frighten that person and it doesn't disturb the atmosphere in the room.
Then she just gone by that Guya Juari, Jagarson, message in Pombo, Shet Sarzandina, Pombo, my media noise. Marshon then Chinto Gamata. Pocus Hayana, Mokanga Tombo, Shet Servantoni, Yama Sama Jagachi. Yama Sam Gantoni, Zubudi Marajozona. Lopat come back, come again to the name, dumb, release over. Zogri. Tati, Tizoyada, Shama, Titadu de Hotela, Mashu Mona, Shakalaka, Lopat Zoman, the Reggie Hondina, Lopat Zokali, the Jr. Come Genji, combat zo come Genji. Then imagine Nam Tomo in doing Chapajan, Shondi Satan, the Jin come to Gora. That is Nam Tomo is sanity, the Chigu Ayo, men I that Tagachigo, and that is Guayo.
Everybody has their own sort of burial habits, of course, and in Tibet we had ours. One of the sort of things up there was that after 3 days, then you're going to take the person off. The limbs would be put in a position like this, and also the legs brought up. So it could be cold, right? And if the hands and legs were stretched out when the person died, it could be rather difficult to get them into that position. So slowly over the 3 days, you'd make sure you could work them up into that position so that it would be okay at the time to have the person taken in.
That in the Jury big coming, Shun to know Jury Matan. Charles the Kala did that you go.
I doubt there's much need for that where you all come from.
What effect does it have on the consciousness if the body
shoot chambo la, because je pung de la shoot chambo.
The Samuel Toya did the Yamarion, Lamsamba strong to you. They go on Jonji. The Manayon, the some Tamu Kaptela, those Tuzi common sick Gangan with them. No as it did, but I'm Chongi Jakudiva noising with Noah Kura Maji, Karisako Gangamu Yangi, Yerma to the Guja Jaguna Kali Kalichi, Tashi Yahujina Mata, Shichimu Taya, Davia, the Joyang.
First of all, if the person was an adept, had some sort of meditational abilities, they're trying to remain with a sort of... It doesn't see things which are...
Matona Sabo some Tangarena, Manta Reshuda with the Tenala, Dimichi Young Yuayendu, the Tomato, the Kandi Takuarisena, Oda me Namshi Tamusijiti, Chalak the Tombe Tagala, Tamar Namshi de Ming the Shiva Capsayon, Pago Tili Carabon, Kam Carabotan, Margaret Tamarabot, Tinin Zomne Tivila Koran Mare. Namshi din Zongu Yuarwa, Tisum Zongu Yuayendu, Tisum Zomba Nonjan, Namshi Zajiti, Chalak the Tombe Kapsa, Kam Karabodi, Mandune, Oda Techiguni, Kam Karabodi Bakuyo. Oda Kam Marabodi, Nabu Chicken on the Tot Pajimar Yongu. The Enda Joayendu, Namshi the poet talking. Oda Tiratina, Poma body Tiratagos. Young Makashida, Tina Mongi, Young Yuarity, Monchua, Parchuala, then I'm going to touch it.
Again, I'm bringing to mind that there's two sorts of person. The person whose mind, spirit leaves almost immediately upon the time of their death. Putting those to the side, talking of the other sort of person whose mind might remain until as long as 3 days. It's said, of course, that the mind becomes enclosed in a smaller and smaller dimension, and that dimension is said to be defined by a red and white sphere. And the red and white sphere enclosing this mind, when these spheres, as you might say, come apart, then the red sphere is seen to have come apart and thus let the spirit go free or go forth by a small amount of blood coming from the nose, and the white part have left through the bottom part of the body. However, what you do find sometimes that people in which there's no sign of any blood or anything from the bottom part of the body, it can happen. But usually you do see that sign, and it's a sign then that final death has occurred.
Oh, that the
before it takes rebirth in another body.
Mara renta chikdang thongta chikni sangyo warwa. Te yendu renshu di pena ji malan tsomba yana mi da dantak pena dantak dan hafta dantak dan di sabu jibchi shirgi yangyo warwa. Wata renta chik mara dingi chik yana renta di ta penchi madiba. that diva renta di tirajina musa. That tonta di mara lamsong makashi cho was the Sanin Tony, Timata the Jualing is young. The tonta. That diva na young, Tibarma Barla, but that Chitsukashi Tony. Jualing young yuari, Shabu chicken honey, then young yuari, tennis on the Shabu chicken, some after chicken honey young yuari, taking a rent on a manasa young yuari, what they do, the renta chick, tonta chick, or that dinner come on what you, the good money, part of the rent on the chicken money, part of the.
So the shortest amount of time that a person will stay in that sort of disembodied state or newly embodied state is a period of it can go on for as long as 49 days or 7 weeks. That's the longest say a person is going to be born as a human being again. The longest they'll stay in that sort of disembodied state of a human is for 7 weeks. The shortest time that they can stay in such a state is for really just a few seconds or moments. It can happen that they'll
Jiwa Lematoni Giana, Danto Chicanani, Pardu Chichonsi, Pardu Cronion, Shua Chonchonda, which young Pardu di young Shamachi, young Pardu di Shamachi, but that very nani did a Jiguaji also.
Say you have a person who's going to be in the intermediate state, disembodied state, for 3 weeks, 21 days. What will happen is every week, after every 7 days, you undergo a sort of a death process, will die and again be, as it were, reborn in not such a gross way, but undergo a process of dying and rebirth. And this is what will happen.
Oh, that in the Hindu, that and the Shuanajan, Pardo Tetsin Rawati Rentachi. Halinama Reshu in a renta tendazam. Tonshu in a tonta tendazam. Tinoni Paraparna Yogi. Then Pardo Kronga no Sigur, then really that Dentrakasia Dengi and then really Nani, young Shama Particuano, Tena Yabati Tenda Chick. Or that the Pardo necessitated that in a
So, in a word, then, there's the person who might immediately take a rebirth, a person who might be in an intermediate state for a long period of time. For the person in the intermediate state for a long period of time, there's rebirths, quasi-rebirths we might say, which happen one after the other every 7 weeks, where the person goes through a sort of a minor death, a minor rebirth in an intermediate state form.
The Dindagan on him, Chimichua Layati, Renton, Natsayan, Guadi, Karadisena, Chua Shamaji Layala. Wadaji Karzago, Chiva Shamalayana, Michua Ling Young Yuari, Hichua Ling Young Yuari, when a Tembichua Ling Young Yuari and do, they don't the Chivada Lamsan Timata, the Chi Chachayo Marayon, Chia was chained over the Nigu Yuarimata, Chi was chained the Maniba in that, and I was Yuanajan. Some of the Shirgira, Renshuti, Chigo Sandina, Chia was chain Maniba and do, Rembojima Dig. But the Lamsan Timata, the chain Nina. Penangasi Delin Dugayana, the pass the Lansan Timata Ragayana, Lansan Hodekan Dogriva. And that pass Marana, Chitokaji Guguna, you are Niguna, some Guguna, the Gugurimata, Duchacha.
So, why this process of sort of undergoing minor deaths and rebirths in this sort of ghost-like state? The reason is because, say one's going to, one's karma is going to cause one to be reborn as an animal or a human being or whatever. Well, you also have to have a certain set of conditions met in order to find yourself in such a state in the future. And I'll give an example. Say somebody's going to set out on a trip from here to Delhi. Okay, they're going to go, but they might not get their ticket. They have to wait until the condition of the ticket's ready, right? So some people might have to wait a day or two until their ticket comes through. So it's sort of like that.
What is the best way to prepare for one's own death?
I don't know, she would be able. Try to check out
Right.
I don't know, she would be able. Try to check the kitchen shoot the
Sorry, so long as you had these. Oda dina karasago tadigjiade, tangasu chugutangni shuayana, chunyamne jingi kawadishina, da chujiade, sheaga mara shakalaka tadigyangi warwa. Renshudi karasana sanji toyaga tadig. Deli tozi nyeshudi kurwali toyaga tadig. Deli nyuanda wode tsishimi tadig. Oda deli mara nyuade karasana shakalaka, kangar chishu yondina tadigdi chujiade yangi warwa. 다 추마징이 옛날 영 니스 가까이와 추마싱이 영 셔와다 다르지 고고 요아레디 때에나 추지 명이지 옛날 추라 떠나 많고라 인도 추지고세 장원 기산도고 말이와 때인도 다 추고 년보디 가르르세나 삼성 부지고 어다 말아 러지고 말아야 고작고 어다 된다가 서 집은원이 마치 로아에나 시야가 다르기 때리 하양이 와 말이와 대왕 다르기 게 와인도 어다 다르지 알아 추징이가 다르지지 추라도나 명이가 다르지가 저기 니용이 와인도 다 때니 강아지 지고요.
So then one has to think about two sorts of people. There's the person who's spent some time in their life earlier familiarizing themselves with practices, religious practices. And then there's the person who's in their earlier life hasn't done anything like that. For the first sort of person, the person who's already familiar with religious meditational practices, that person, indeed, at the time that they see that their death perhaps is approaching or whatever, for them it's indeed to turn their mind to religious practices, which is to say to bring to mind those religious thoughts, the various sorts of meditation or religious practices, and to, as you might say, put the mind through its paces of bringing those to mind. What about the other person, the person who in their life hasn't really ever thought much about religious things at all? Then it's the heart of religion that somehow that sort of person should try to get hold of. And what's the heart of religion? It's basically being kind, feeling good, being kind, thinking well of others. And that's the heart of it. So to somehow ennoble one's mind by turning it to think well of others, to hope that others have good come to them in their life. That's really the essential thing in any religious practice. So if people who've never before thought about that can somehow do that, then indeed that would be the best thing that they can do to prepare themselves for their death.
Bariaga Ninkanda Yoyana, Yamar Nediga Daddy, Manon, Chontoyaga, Daddy Gigo Yara, Nedi, Namni, Nabino in Chomiala, Nedigo, that the dagger, Daddy the Cardi, Nabretilla, Shosayana, Yon Chontoyana, Choyala, Rabadi Nedigo at the dagger time on do. The new Kalasaya Mena, Kalasaya G, the dagger time on do. That the Conga Diago. Taduk Savati Karasana, Pisha Yapojiana, Tadu Yapojianga, that they are not Tadu Naka content, Tadu Yapojigo, Petina.
Maybe I'll give you an example for this one if I might. Let's say you've got a plane trip planned. Okay, so everybody knows you could get into some serious trouble on a plane, the thing could go down, right? So you've got to get yourself a parachute. Okay, so you not only need a parachute, once the planes go down, you parachute it to Earth. What you're going to eat, you still got to get yourself a little food together. So you get yourself a sort of a little care package together in case the plane goes down. But if you ask, what's the main thing you've got to get together to get your care package together? You got to have some money, right? If you don't have any money, there's nothing you can do.
When I do, go. Shooting Dino ni marji chuga don sianda. Sanjigan zebada nyame chigua ko don siayana. Jerebo gona kasi nyekumare sambu chakarwa tiraga tadiji. Yon chuga tono mengi na yo mara don nyembo dashi mala yitangda bu kala sayanda tena mushiba masiayana konga gabu yangrwa. Wada tiraga tadiji na konga yakarwa.
It's sort of like if the person then is has some knowledge of religion from before, they'll enjoy listening to stories about the Buddha's excellent qualities, what he did. for others, helped others, and so forth. That'll cause joy in the person's mind. If the person's not like that, then just talking about how others have helped others, how somebody did something nice for somebody else, that can make them feel good, bring joy to their mind. So those two ways are the ways sort of we prepare.
That's good. She did not be no under dinner. Temuta I didn't know you are second. They did so the Jerembo, Kangayango, so the Tadri, Fetina, Chichini the Tadricia, Chumajangi the Tadricia, Tadricia, Montachuyo.
How did you go to Tesco? The Kangapere. And now it is true. The Tambo goes to the Tammy need in the meeting under no joy. Need to say, Nabdin Kashona Tadrico. Then in Nabdin on your Kalasaya, Minito Kalasaya, you know, Kangamayong Tadri, what they are Tadri. Then you Robert so young, Kalati and Diana, Robert so Gabo. Then you can't go. I think maybe I misunderstood and mistranslated a little bit. When the person gets in the aeroplane, then if they've also got a little bit of food for their friends as well.
Nabino Drogon is Sakani, Lanson Kapti Kataduna on Kayarwa, when I really to Zeni, Jagatadumina, Januayambiwa, Sayat in the Tagunan, Nabinani, Mumani Tamadina, none in your say.
I guess what I'm trying to put across is if you're on a train, then you can sort of get something from the station, but if you're up in the air in an airplane and you didn't bring everything with you, you can't sort of rush outside and buy it, right? So there's a bit of a difference. You've got to get ready before you take off, as it were, because once you're up there, there's not a lot you can sort of rush outside and get ready. Yes.
What I think Shakala Tadridi, Mumani Tadriata, Kawayinsico, Sano Mobotan, Tadumajina.
So what I'm saying, in other words, is that it's a situation where you have to prepare beforehand, and you can't just sort of get it together while you're in the middle of it.
What is the Buddhist view of suicide?
Already, Ramsi Japasi, that number 2 Jimmy, number 2 la Ichi, that Dushi Jim, so Makasi, Sambino, so Kanaki, Wayana, then he controls. Controls the controls the Sasana, me some Tayadi, Tagatkis over the Indumari, Niana, Manina Mania, Dicatino over the end, so says about the end, so Sevayana. Gente se baga divide young the end so sena magic says about divide young and number 2 Jingy the new chambodan divide chambo young. That number 2 Jingy Mangi and I Chu Kitchen did you are married so Saturday, so soon my neighbor so I and so Saturday Rona start chambo you are Matila Mara Tonji say Zavayana, the Jonji, the noise, Ranger, Jonji, and do the Maduaji and the Chakio.
So, if one's a Buddhist, then it's really a great fault to kill oneself. Why so? Because really what's happened, isn't it, is that anger has come up. And that anger directed against others can lead to one killing others. And that's a great fault. And one's an important person, one's a living being, and to destroy a living being when all living beings are so important is wrong. And to hurt anyone, oneself included, is wrong. And so, as a Buddhist, it's wrong to hurt oneself, to kill oneself. And then, what if one isn't a Buddhist? What then? Well, one's still an important person, isn't one? To harm an important thing, an important person like that's wrong. So it's just, it's wrong. And it's considered wrong, dikpa in Tibetan, to harm a person. And it's just simply not right to harm
somebody when she Sosola Pentayomi, Majena Pentayomi, that you been Mudayan and Namdayana, Tinaji, you are in Soso Conto Savayana, Sunny then Namdayana, Mudayana, and some Metatayana, Chuguniton Gina, Manduka Chimbuchi, Chuguniton Kimalingi in a Dosan Chimbuchi Tong, you are. Dosan Chimbo the Tong into Pisha Mambuchi, Sosola, Maber Zoy. Savani, Chukumaning in a Tinduki, Pisha Mabuchin, Pisha, Gion, Gion, Savat, Tagivarimata, Lamsa Pisha Mabuchin, Pisha, Gumon, Buya, Margila, Ravana, Lamsa Metatana, Manduari.
Maybe I'll give another example here. It's sort of like, say you have a new motor car, a new car, and it's a good one. And if you're a Buddhist and you get into a ferocious rage, and you completely wreck the thing. That's wrong, because to be in a rage, and out of a rage to completely destroy something like that, is just considered not worthy of a religious sort of mind, to allow yourself to be completely overcome by anger. But what if you weren't a Buddhist? It's still absurd, isn't it? You took so long to get that money together to buy that car. You had to work so hard, and it's just considered absurd, isn't it, to work so hard to get such an excellent car, and then to just completely throw all that money away. Even if you're not religious, it's still absolutely wrong and absurd. So whether you're religious or not, it's absolutely wrong and silly to kill yourself.
That in the end, the Goni, that Chanzima, Chane Termiji, never touching with a Mekontinda, Tinaga, Chaginomi and do, Tinaga, never Yam talk, the Somera, Tinaga, similar Ratundo. Kodonda over that in Hotona Yapuiva Matadi, Messagiti, Nasaga, Kangarambuya Yendu, Rangaron Sayanda, Rangaron, Tapadam, Chayanda, Tindavin Kayangi, and Mumani, Hosu Yapotona, then they Yapomaki.
So, it's thinking in this way, if somehow you can help people who are in that tremendous suffering that people can get into, real hardship. Because people can, of course, within such a condition of tremendous upset and hardship, they can indeed kill themselves, they can hang themselves, they can do these terrible things. If over a period of time you can introduce them to ideas about how their mind's working, then you can really be of tremendous benefit to them to help them out of those difficulties they'll find themselves in.
For people with severe pain, is it wise to give injections or medication to reduce the pain that may have the side effect of lowering the level of consciousness or clouding the mind?
main Kashidia, that's no.
Commanded Tindago Nasa Shichimbu Jabba Kabza Cherton Shuayana, those Nasa Shichimbu, she told it on Toyanda. The Manayoji Shichimbu Yongi, Soaga Masanikin. Mara Zendwa in a Kabja on Sakura, Tinayana, those Pendakau younger. Young some with not Tamiji, some with not Tamiji, some of dinner, some with not like 20 or day and do Mr. Tinala Zigni, some with not Tamidon, Tinajila, Karasigo, some cook up the Makawaj in the Kamajana. Young some with not Matamiji and Mr. Kakayan do, tell them those. Zaminga sort with the Jamna, Pengu, what that? Did I in touch the Pengarisiamandi, touch the Nokurisiamandi, Tagatagina?
There's no blanket answer here at all. You have to look at the individual person. The excruciating pain, if somebody's in excruciating pain, to somehow relieve them of that pain is obviously a good thing. If you have a person with a tremendous spirit or a tremendous capability, somebody who can sort of bear it and bear up under it and keep a sort of clarity of what's happening to them, then to sort of, give them a soporific which takes away that clarity maybe it's not the thing to do, but it will completely depend upon that person. And a person who's got a capability to sort of remain with knowledge of what's happening and not to just be sort of made more vegetable-like. Is that a strong way to put it? If they can bear up to it, then it's obviously better to leave them. But if the pain is so excruciating, then obviously it's better to alleviate the pain. So we'll have to go with each specific case.
Oh, that didn't never touching good, then he shall see you a lot. I didn't send you not say young boy. Turns of Girkmari. They in a some tonton, the net you are not sad young Yalamar. King give a toxic and do, or that to Karaseko. King and Nasashan, some sugar, I say, Fortune on it, the young boy, the young kick down. Or that they need to Ronki Chut on Mingy and a young Nasasajidi, Chu Yongia young you are, Chu Mingia young you are, and do some treat in a pair you are married. Daily mar some Kibuji, Monoyakonda, yep, yes. Or that the let you are in a Payong Grisina, Tinaga Guniamar, mean to Tongo on the senior, also Tona, then I am Pangua. Then it you Tinaga Ganger, Nasa, she children on a that you send dimmer, nothing on the Maton, Monoyakonda Jam, mean Nathan, then on some Jagongala, Shaman did let you manure yourself in a monoja. No, I know, so soon as I know what the sentence yellow, nothing what the good choices in it. Molavia want a jamna, but she money in I on Pentayo. What are they? Tomboni. I don't see Javandana. Some long by Shariaga, without the good work of Yana, also Yapo, don't tell the Yaposhita.
So, also though, if when the person first comes into the hospital, if they're a person who has some familiarity with Buddhist meditational practices, then as they begin to experience this pain, if they are capable of bringing to mind ideas such as the pain is because of certain reasons, certain conditions. The conditions give rise to the pain. If they are capable also of bringing to mind ideas of mind training, which can really strengthen the mind, sort of build up the mind, to say, you know, I'm capable of all sorts of bearing all sorts of difficulties. If the person has some familiarity with these practices, they can sort of find within themselves a sort of a way to laugh at things which ordinarily would be excruciatingly difficult to bear. So that those sort of practices, if they've done them before, one can sort of try to nudge them in the direction of those practices and sort of waken up those thoughts which can allow them to be able to bear otherwise what seem to be incredibly difficult situations. What about the person who's never had the opportunity of such practices, of doing such practices? One can mention such things as really, it makes no difference whether one believes in a religion or doesn't. Everybody at a certain point gets these horrible pains, the pains of dying and so forth. It really makes no difference what you believe, you're going to get them. So, in a certain sense, one doesn't need to get, so tied up in them and worried by them. One can sort of try to distance oneself from them and see that just like everybody else, it's happening to me too.
Younger, Dendry and the Chichila, Tuni, Nasa de Yamago, Listen and Mamaji, Jichikotoki, Yamari, they and do some treating in Hangamari, daily Marasami on Boji, Monavia Kodajak, some change Yala, Nasa and the Yamato, Yanjina Gomtiat.
So, not only that, if even a person who's never really thought about religious training of the mind before can probably get their mind, at times at least, around the idea, if I'm upset, it isn't making my pain go away. My being upset isn't relieving my pain. So at least try not to upset the mind. You won't have to experience it anyway, but try to somehow let the mind not become tied up in it. And then beyond that also, one can start to think like this. May this pain, a sort of prayers, one can start to make prayers. May this excruciating pain never happen to anybody else. you just keep going, just may it never happen to anybody else, and you keep making that prayer. Or if this pain ever happens to anybody else, may they quickly be relieved of it. Those sort of prayers, even if a person's never been religious in their life before, they're great prayers to make, and they can be tremendously beneficial in the mind.
What that did I cheat? That didn't get as a good. Tonton Yambuda was a duona, or that you in China's Sambi Denimer, Nova Sanju, Chuanya Lenji, Tenaga Toko, Change in Emergy, something non tapa, or that Lomba Sosonaji, never touching, share the touching, teach it, man consumer. Signa Panta Yorasi, Tena Concher Mangu and do, Tela Tenimer, Cardi, Mahobanaji, Zibu Capsa, Tinaga, Yantaba, Shakalaki, Neba the Soda, the Shafshishuaga, Lagnet Capsa and Nayon. Without Conso Tomer, Mancon, Temata, the Southunji Capsa, Masu Tomer, the Dragon, Charity Tomaton, the Sokanga, Number Sanji, Chula, Hosanji, Temdiga Goni, yes. They and do Masu, number Sanji, Johnny, Dagden Yamji Sanji, yes. Sanji Santa, Dagden Yamji, what that, and Yamni Giagacheta, Chanos Shantashu, yes. They and do Chanosumuni Samotana, the Soso Dapo Mini, Tami Mini, Tindayana, Masu, Chanos Pamanoje, Giag Masu Samotana, Chanos Shashi, they know the Chanos. Maso Shashi Singing the Zone was a pardon, Mag Sabana, Sound Town. Shasonayana was a Dapo Jackery, Rola Dapo Jackery, my Shiva Castle, Chonoso, Convention Jiggery, Shiva Castle, Chonoso, Convention Jiggery, Day and Chonoso.
That being upset within oneself doesn't help oneself. That somehow thinking of others and not, how to say, bearing up because of seeing the importance of others, and bearing up in such a manner that one doesn't allow one's concern with oneself to completely affect one's mental state, but regardless of the hardship that one has to bear relative to oneself, the importance that one's giving to others is such that it somehow diminishes and diminishes the importance of what's happening to oneself, and gives one an inner strength. If one can somehow impart that to others, then indeed the benefit of this whole project, this whole idea that one is undertaking will be great indeed.
What that did I do? I don't go many in a chance did I charge Zoguada, did I go to Kyoada. Singing that month and did I never touch in a Shapshia to so Jomatilla, Monitonica Marine Tabani, Maragasio. The Yuatic address in was in number Sanju chewing Yambuti, Sanjuji, Sam, Dinoni, Tavian Yamji, Ron Yerwer to Jiwara Sijiti and do Yamnejina, Gum Jamni Yamnejina, Tinibudi. Timazi, Lang Materna, Chanosima and Sabajutsin, Shapshia, Monitonica, Tavian Yamjigo. Dagden Yamjigan, Sabas in Nayana, Metin Daki, only and Dagden Yamjigan, Mamma Sabachis in that, Mitilang with the Jiggy. Dinner is it, Maria Ho Youngry, only Comchala Suraman and Daki, Chance of the President.
So finally then,
Chance the Dagomar charges.
What you're doing comes out of the whole presentation of a religious meditational path, then the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, all those beings are certainly backing you up in this. So you shouldn't think you're doing it alone.
Thank you,